Book 2, Chapter 12 of the Lancashire Witches. This recording is in the public domain. Reading by Andy Minter. The Lancashire Witches, a Romance of Pendle Forest, by William Harrison Ainsworth. Book 2, Pendle Forest. Chapter 12. The Mysteries of Malkin Tower. It was a subterranean chamber, gloomy and of vast extent, the roof low, and supported by 9 ponderous stone columns, to which rings and rusty chains were attached, still retaining the mouldering bones of those they had held captive in life. Amongst others was a gigantic skeleton, quite entire, with an iron girdle round the middle. Fragments of mortality were elsewhere scattered about, showing the numbers who had perished in the place. On either side were cells, closed by massive doors secured by bolts and locks. At one end were 3 immense coffers made of oak, hooped with iron, and fastened by large padlocks. Near them stood a large armoury, likewise of oak, and sculptured with the ensigns of Whalley Abbey, proving it had once belonged to that establishment. Probably it had been carried off by some robber band. At the opposite end of the vault were 2 niches, each occupied by a rough-hewn statue, the one representing a warlike figure, with a visage of extraordinary ferocity, and the other an anchoress, in her hood and wimple, with a rosary in her hand. On the ground beneath lay a plain flag, covering the mortal remains of the wicked pair, and proclaiming them to be Isole de Heton and Blackburn the freebooter. The pillars were ranged in 3 lines, so as to form, with the arches above them, a series of short passages, in the midst of which stood an altar, and near it a large cauldron. In front, elevated on a block of granite, was a marvellous piece of sculpture, wrought in jet, and representing a demon seated on a throne. The visage was human, but the beard was that of a goat, while the feet and lower limbs were like those of the same animal. 2 curled horns grew behind the ears, and a third, shaped like a conch, sprang from the centre of the forehead, from which burst a blue flame, throwing a ghastly light on the objects surrounding it. The only discernible approach to the vault was a steep narrow stone staircase, closed at the top by a heavy trap door. Other outlet apparently there was none. Some little air was admitted to this foul abode through flues contrived in the walls, the entrances to which were grated, but the light of day never came there. The flame, however, issuing from the brow of the demon image, like the lamps in the sepulchres of the disciples of the Rosy Cross, was ever burning. Behind the sable statue was a deep well, with water as black as ink, wherein swarmed snakes and toads and other noxious reptiles, and as the lurid light fell upon its surface, it glittered like a dusky mirror, unless where broken by the horrible things that lurked beneath, or crawled about on its slimy brim. But snakes and toads were not the only tenants of the vault. At the head of the steps squatted a monstrous and misshapen animal, bearing some resemblance to a cat, but big as a tiger. Its skin was black and shaggy, its eyes glowed like those of the hyena, and its cry was like that of the same treacherous beast. Among the gloomy colonnades other swart and bestial shapes could be indistinctly seen moving to and fro. In this abode of horror were 2 human beings, one a young maiden of exquisite beauty, and the other almost a child, and strangely deformed. The elder, overpowered by terror, was clinging to a pillar for support, while the younger, who might naturally be expected to exhibit the greatest alarm, appeared wholly unconcerned, and derided her companion's fears. "Oh, Jennet!" exclaimed the elder of the 2, "is there no means of escape?" "None whatever," replied the other. "You mun stay here till Granny Demdike comes for you." "Oh, that the earth would open and snatch me from these horrors!" cried Alizon. "My reason is forsaking me. Would I could kneel and pray for deliverance, but something prevents me." "Reet," replied Jennet. "It's as better your life's worth to kneel and pray here, unless you choose to go and throw yourself at the feet of yon black image." "Kneel to that idol! Never!" exclaimed Alizon; and while striving to call upon heaven for aid, a sharp convulsion seized her, and deprived her of the power of utterance. "Ey towd ye how it would be," remarked Jennet, who watched her narrowly. "Yo knoa yo're church here, and if yo want to worship, it mun be at yon altar. Dunna yo hear how angry the cats are how they growl and spit, and see how their een glisten. They'll tear yo i' pieces, like so many tigers, if yo offend them." "Tell me why I am brought here, Jennet," inquired Alizon, after a brief pause. "Granny Demdike will tell yo that," replied the little girl; "boh to my belief," she added, with a mocking laugh, "hoo means to make a witch on yo, loike aw the rest on us." "She cannot do that without my consent," cried Alizon, "and I would die 1,000 deaths rather than yield it." "That remains to be seen," replied Jennet, tauntingly. "Yo obstinate stuff, right enough, no doubt; boh Granny Demdike's used to deal wi' such folk." "Oh, why was I born?" cried Alizon, bitterly. "Yo may weel ask that," responded Jennet, with a loud unfeeling laugh, "fo ey see neaw great use yo're on, wi' your pretty face and bright een, unless it be to make one hate yo." "Is it possible you can say this to me, Jennet?" cried Alizon. "What have I done to incur your hatred? I have always loved you, and striven to please and serve you. I have always taken your part against others, even when you were in the wrong. Oh, Jennet, you cannot hate me." "Boh ey do," replied the little girl, spitefully. "Ey hate yo now worse than any one else. Ey hate yo because yo're no longer my sister, because yo're a grand lady's daughter, and a grand lady yourself. Ey hate yo because young Richard Assheton loves yo, and because yo ha better luck i' aw things than ey ha, or con expect to ha. That's why ey hate yo, Alizon. When yo're a witch ey shanna love yo, because then we shall be equal once more." "That will never be, Jennet," said Alizon, sadly but firmly. "Your grandmother may immure me in this dungeon, and scare away my senses, but she will never rob me of my hopes of salvation." As the words were uttered, a clang like that produced by a stricken gong shook the vault. The beasts roared fiercely, the black waters of the fountain bubbled up, and were lashed into foam by the angry reptiles, and a larger jet of flame than before burst from the brow of the demon's statue. "I warned yo, Alizon," said Jennet, alarmed by these demonstrations; "boh since yo pay no heed to owt ey say, ey'll leave you to your fate." "Oh, stay with me, Jennet," shrieked Alizon. "By our past sisterly affection, I implore you to remain. You are some protection to me from these dreadful things." "Ey dunna want to protect yo, lest yo do os yo're bidden," replied Jennet. "Why should yo be better than me?" "Ah, why indeed?" cried Alizon. "Would I have the power to turn your heart, to open your eyes to evil, to save you, Jennet." These words were followed by another clang, louder and more brattling than the first. The solid walls of the dungeon were shaken, and the heavy columns rocked, while to Alizon's affrighted gaze it seemed as if the sable statue arose upon its ebon throne, and stretched out its arm menacingly towards her. The poor girl was saved from further terror by insensibility. How long she remained in this condition she could not tell, nor did it appear that any efforts were made to restore her; but when she recovered, she found herself stretched upon a rude pallet within an arched recess, the entrance to which was screened by a piece of tapestry. On lifting it aside, she perceived she was no longer in the vault, but in an upper chamber, as she judged, and not incorrectly, of the tower. The room was lofty and circular, and the walls of enormous thickness, as shown by the deep embrasures of the windows, in one of which, the outlet having been built up, the pallet was placed. A massive oak table, 2 or 3 chairs of antique shape, and a wooden stool, constituted the furniture of the room. The stool was set near the fireplace, and beside it stood a strangely fashioned spinning wheel, which had apparently been recently used, but neither the old hag nor her granddaughter were visible.